WNST, Towson's down here a little bit, Luke, as we go into the bye week, because Lord knows I moved 10,000 miles a minute. But this is a real time for like sitting back and reflecting, I'm sure, for Harbaugh, for Bisciotti, for Flacco, for even the drunk fans yelling at Jermaine Illuminor as I left the stadium on Sunday afternoon about the root and the cause. And look, you and I are going to go through this back and forth after this loss to the Steelers, and we have all this extra time, and the Orioles are doing nothing, so we don't have anything to talk about there. The Terps devastation, we're going to get to that, and everything going on in the world, and the election this week, and all the other things happening. Boy, the Ravens find themselves at one hell of a crossroads here, and this is 13 days of reflection, is what I'm going to call this, as to where this is, what it is, and where it's going, man.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, I don't even know if it's a crossroads. I think it's heading down the road that we've talked about.
Well, we're at the Y, right? Literally, yeah. We're there now. We're at the junction where we're getting out, pumping gas, and saying, "Are we going toward Albuquerque or are we going toward the ocean?" You know what I mean? Like,
and I think it really feels like it's heading in the direction that changes are coming. And I don't mean this week. And frankly, I think it would be out of character for Steve Bisciotti. And frankly, I think John Harbaugh's deserved or has done enough great work here for the first half of his tenure and brought a Super Bowl and 3 AFC championships and playoff appearances, but also acknowledging it hasn't happened since then but once. But I think when you look at the history of the NFL, great organizations sometimes do have to fire a coach or sometimes do have to make a change. That's very clear, and you shouldn't just have continuity for the sake of it. But looking back, and this is unofficial, I didn't get this from Elias, but from as far as I could tell, the last time that a Super Bowl winning coach was fired by the team with which he won that Super Bowl in the middle of the season was Don McCafferty in Bob Irsay's first season as Colts owner. Again,
that was the first stroke of his genius of, you know, the artwork that he painted over the last 25 years of his life, right? The first thing is, let's put the bullet in the back of the head of the coach who just won a Super Bowl here. Right? Let's do that. That's a good plan.
And my point by that is typically coaches who have reached the pinnacle with that organization. Now, you can talk about a coach going elsewhere and then getting fired in the middle of a season. I'm not saying that hasn't happened, but as far as I could tell, that's the last time that's happened. And let's face it, if we're talking about great organizations, model organizations, yes, you have to make changes. Do you typically see those organizations make a change in the middle of the season? And for what purpose? Do you really think an interim coach is going to suddenly turn this thing around over the course of 7 games? And
the best chance you have to beat the Cincinnati Bengals 2 weeks from now is to go back into the building and put a game plan together to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not to make the owner the centerpiece of your bye week, which that's the number one reason I believe this wouldn't happen is Steve Bisciotti would have to show up here in flip-flops this week and talk about it. And that's just not something he wants to interject himself into now, January, February. Watching this for 20 years, he literally is the reluctant genius owner who doesn't want to be around this and certainly does not want to become the story this week. I think that's the reason this – and because it wouldn't help anything, to your point, right? It doesn't give him a better chance to beat the Bengals 2 weeks from now.
Right, because – and we mentioned this in our previous conversations, but it's worth saying again, who are you turning to? I mean, is it Jerry Rosburg? Well, their special teams have been really mediocre. Is it Wink Martindale? Their defense has fallen apart over the last 2 weeks, 9 quarters of football. Marty Morningwig? No. James Urban? Maybe, but I'm not really sure why. What have you seen there that you really are convinced by that? So what's the purpose of it? Now, if this team were 1-8 and it was clear that players had completely quit on Harbaugh and you were seeing lots of really, undisciplined penalties, meaning personal fouls and, Vontaze Burfict kind of conduct. If you were seeing stuff like that and it was clear that Harbaugh had completely lost the locker room, I'll hear it then. I'll hear that possibility.
Well, and I think the other part of this is it is a good locker room. I mean, just because they've lost football games the last month,
right.
We like these guys in September. We like these guys in August. Right. It's November. I don't like these guys less. I would just say they look tired. They look slow. They certainly look disorganized on offense. This Lamar Jackson thing, as much as we could have talked about this in May or June and said, this is an experiment that ain't never worked, right? Like, go show me where this sort of thing has been kumbaya and they go win a Super Bowl like this or go deep, or that hasn't happened so much. And so for that, I don't know that we could stand all that shocked, but I also think that this isn't we have to go in there and exterminate this place because the place is wretched. I mean, again, and I hate to mix and mingle, but I shall. 115 losses, and the baseball team doesn't have an owner, doesn't have a general manager, doesn't have a manager. This is not that at the bye week. This is a team that over the last month just hasn't been good enough, quite frankly.
And that's fair. And look, I mean, the bar shouldn't be that low as far as the comparison anyway, but for midseason, totally. Again, we're not talking about the end of the season, because if things continue on this path, I've already said, and I'll maintain, I think it is time for a reboot then. And I think that reboot is not necessarily just John Harbaugh or just John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco. I think it would be a reboot to get younger, to expunge what's been a tight cap for a really long time, and the Ravens trying to kind of piecework this thing together over, from a year-to-year basis. And we've been, we go back to 2014, 2015 even with this. If you can recall, I remember sitting at the Combine with you. It was the year that the Ravens gave Flacco his extension. So they were coming off their 5-11 season, and many people wanted to kind of make it that, okay, they had some injuries and they lost a lot of close games. And I remember sitting at the Combine with you and saying at the time, and I didn't think this is what the Ravens should do at that point, but I said they could, at that point, look to reset a little bit. You could have cleared some other players out, gotten a little bit younger. You could have held off an extra year on giving Flacco an extension to try to make his cap figure more manageable, and who knows what would have happened.
Dude, you and I could write a book on all of this, right? Like where they've been with Suggs through 2 massive injuries, and the fact that he's still running around in Week 9 and quite frankly looks the part of the aging veteran right now who probably would better be suited for 15 to 18 to 20 snaps a game, and just being that guy, especially at this point. There have been a lot of directions they've taken with missed draft picks. That the Matt Elam miss leads to spending money on Weddle. That letting the Pernell McPhees and the Krugers, whomever they are, go out and get their money elsewhere leads to you saying we need to go find the next Zadarius Smith or the next Matt Judon. There have been a lot of things that have happened after Ray Lewis and Ed Reed that I would have easily been able to predict, and I'm sure we did predict. Here 5-6 years ago to say, when you lose Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and they go the other direction, you got to pick that slack up, and that slack doesn't happen by bringing in, a middle linebacker from Jacksonville to hang around for a year or two and be an elder statesman. That happens when C.J. Mosley becomes that guy, or when Brandon Williams becomes Haloti Ngata, or when Matt Elam becomes Ed Reed, or when Jimmy Smith becomes, a more sober and on-time version of Chris McAllister, right? So, if all of that happens and your kicker's not your best player, literally, this era is going to be punctuated by the kicker being their best player. And that's just a fact. And when that happens, you're not going to beat the New England Patriots.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And we've talked about some of the draft misses. We've talked about some of the draft philosophy. I mean, how about the fact that you look at who Joe Flacco won the Super Bowl with? Arguably, his 2 biggest weapons were who? Ray Rice and Anquan Boldin. Well, Anquan Boldin was thrown out a few weeks after they won the Super Bowl and never replaced him. And I'll remind everyone of that, even though it's been told over and over and over because it was that big of a mistake.
By the way, I was standing in the Modell Lyric that night. They streamed.
They did their premiere for their NFL Films Super Bowl season video or movie, whatever it was. But they did that, and then we all know what happened with Ray Rice. Not just what happened that ultimately led to him being terminated, but he was out of shape and overweight the year after the Super Bowl. So you think about those two weapons just right there for Joe Flacco, and forget about Flacco for a second. Just this offense in general, just how the Ravens' offense has tried to produce. They had those two individuals. They got rid of Bolden and never really replaced them. A year later, they brought in Steve Smith, who was an older version of Bolden and not quite the same player. And then look at the running back position. Since Ray Rice was cut in 2014, who have they had? Look, Justin Forsett was a great story for a year, but he was a journeyman. Terrence West was a good story being a local kid, but he's a guy. And even Alex Collins
Kenneth Dixon was a good story for like 2 weeks, literally, right? He was going to save the franchise and be our, whatever, the guy who was going to be 112 yards and 28 rushes and, making it happen and getting you to the stick. We haven't had that guy. Forsett was that guy. But since then, I wanted to buy into the Alex Collins story, but right now I'm not buying into the offensive line. When you got Jermaine Illuminor out there and you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers lining up, and hey, I'll give Zeus Jr. at least some credit. I mean, he looks like he's going to be able to play here. I don't think any scout in the league would say Jermaine Illuminor is ever going to look like Ronnie Stanley on a good day. I mean, that's just... Sure. That's how this works when we get together and go out to Indianapolis, right? I mean, that's why we put all of this into this. Jermaine Illuminor is not supposed to look like John Ogden, and he didn't, and he probably won't. And the best you could hope for is get Nick Boyle over there and start chipping and digging, and let's try to run the football a little bit.
Yeah, no question. He's your third-string left tackle. Keep in mind, it wasn't just Ronnie Stanley out on Sunday, James Hurst as well. And I know people are listening to that and saying, well, you're making excuses. Well, look around the league and look at the offensive line play. Most teams don't have 5 starting caliber offensive linemen that they feel good about, let alone you're down to your third left tackle. So that is a factor. It absolutely is a variable, and we saw that at work on Sunday. Flacco was under duress, and then at other times, and this is on Flacco, he felt pressure that wasn't there, quite frankly, and
ghosts, literally.
It impacted him on a number of throws. I was up to the wee hours of the morning, or early Monday morning, rewatching that game. More so on the offensive side. We'll get to the defense certainly because they have their issues as well. But there were a lot of throws missed, and I think a lot of that had to do with the pressure that was there at other times. And there were some throws he missed because of the pressure. I want to be clear about that. So it's less than ideal. And I think going back to, you mentioned the Lamar Jackson thing and how disjointed this whole thing feels. It does feel disjointed, but you know what it also feels? It's predictable. And let me tell you why. The Ravens ran the ball 16 times on Sunday. 7 of those came from their, quote, traditional one-quarterback offense. What that means is 9 of those runs came when Lamar Jackson is in the game. And I think the official game book had him as playing 13 snaps. I had him as 12, just in keeping track. But you kind of do the math there. When Jackson isn't on the field, the Ravens really aren't running the ball very much at all. And they're becoming even more predictable in that way. And when they do, they don't run it particularly well. And when he is in the game, now, he did throw the completion to Michael Crabtree in the third quarter. And if he's going to be out there, he has to be a threat to throw because you're even more predictable.
It has to be respected. His throwing ability needs to be respected, and you know what they're saying. That kid's sloppy, go pick the ball. Go out there, he's going to throw the ball in a place where you can get it to, and go pick him. And that's what the defensive coaches are saying. Respect him to throw the football enough that you might come down with it, right? Literally.
And that's possible, but he needs, if he's going to be out there, though, you can't have this where he's out there and they just run, and when he's not out there, they're throwing.
And you can't have it out there where Flacco looks like a Canadian goose out on the outside that he's going to land somewhere, and there's no chance he's going to get involved. And you certainly don't want him out there throwing forearm shivers at cornerbacks, right?
Right. So, and that's another element to this. Now, when Jackson's just running up the middle or running off guard or running off tackle in the opposite direction, that's probably not that big of a deal. But if he's going to throw, then you have one less receiver out in the rail. So it really, again, I've talked about this a little bit as we were reacting immediately after the game, but I really see this going one of three ways, other than if it's just going to continue the way it goes, and I really don't have much confidence that it's going to become, it's going to work more smoothly, because I feel like it's gotten worse as far as being disjointed and not having flow and not having rhythm. You either need to figure out a way to run the football effectively with your, quote, traditional offense, and then you scale back some of the Lamar Jackson stuff. You need to that, or you need to be able to trust Jackson to throw the football a little bit more than they have, because we haven't seen that very much at all. Or, and this is the radical approach, and the more the long-term view of this, you just say, well, we can only run the football with Jackson in the game because of what he brings, and that helps the running back whenever they're running their RPOs or zone read, whatever. And we also think he can make enough plays with his arm that we're going to give that a try. Now, I don't expect that to happen at this point. I think maybe a month from now that could be a far more compelling argument, especially if the Ravens drop a couple more games and they're, say, 5-7, let's say, going into the final 4 weeks of the season. Then I think it's kind of a no-brainer. You need to see what you have at that point. But until then, I just don't see how they're continuing to do things. I don't see that working. I don't see that suddenly being figured out, because the way they're doing it right now, they're getting some modest success on the ground with Jackson in the game, but it hasn't been overwhelming. And I think it's had a negative impact on the traditional passing game.
Let me take one break here. Luke and I are discussing all of this. You can find us out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault all week long at WNST.net. We're going to be on all of this. I'm going to mix in some Terps. I'm going to mix in some Orioles. We're certainly going to mix in some thoughts about Bisciotti and Harbaugh and the future of the organization, and piece by piece, everything that's going on. It's all brought to you by our friends at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. Since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes, and there's something for everyone's budget over at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. They buy gold as well, but you can see them in Parkville, or you can see them right off 695, just on the north side of the Beltway, or find them on the web at charlesnewsonoff.com, where they say, let's grow old together. Also, my friends at the Lee Tessier team, I got to know Lee through my wife's leukemia battle and his winning the Man of the Year for Leukemia, Lymphoma and Leukemia Society, or Leukemia Lymphoma. LLS, yes, just make sure I get that right. Lee Tessier is my realtor, and I'm selling my condo right now downtown, and we're moving around, so you can check him out at leetessier.com. Let me just tell you, from soup to nuts, the beginning point, this has been a pleasant experience for me, so I can say that firsthand. So if you know Lee, tell him I said hello. leetessier.com. If you're buying or selling, thinking about it, hit them up. They will take great care of you. And also our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. The coffee always brewed fresh, and the fried chicken that I enjoy so much. Make sure you're using the ROFO Rewards card or downloading the app. When you're pumping your gas, you get your Western fries free, your fried chicken free. That makes it even taste better. Maryland Jockey Club also sponsoring us in our morning newspaper. I had a little piece this morning about the Bisciotti Harbaugh situation. If you're not up on our morning newspaper, you can sign up online at WNST.net. It is brought to you by our friends at Laurel Park. We had a nice weekend with the Breeders' Cup. If you haven't been down there, nice and warm inside. The ponies are running outside. You can bet the ponies. You can watch the game, especially on a Saturday. It's a great place to spend Saturday afternoon down in Laurel. They've remodeled it. Huge TVs, beautiful new sports bar. Trust me when I'm telling you, you're going to be really impressed if you go to Laurel. Simple as that. Also brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. It's $5 down, $10 a month. That's how you get involved at Planet Fitness. Speaking about warm inside and getting in the best shape, it is November. It is the pumpkin spice season for me. I've already started on that. The gingerbread. I got caught up with the eggnog because my friends at Royal Farms are telling me about the Cloverland eggnog, so I had to pick some up the other day. Planet Fitness, they'll fix you up. $5 down, $10 a month. Luke, I just want to take a little bit of a breather because there's a lot of directions to go in here. But this Lamar Flacco debate, right? Like, to me, if this is bye week and I'm running the place, and I don't really say this much, if I were in charge, if this were my decision, I would go full speed ahead with Flacco and try to get the 5 wins and try to sort of level set the season and maybe resuscitate the season 2 weeks from now if you can somehow beat Cincinnati 2 weeks from now. And I don't think that means Lamar Jackson under center throwing the football around and benching Flacco, but I think we're another loss or 2 away from that, right? Like, we are now where in December, from what I understand Bisciotti to be, he will get involved. He will say, look, the future of this, if Joe Flacco's not going to be our quarterback next year, then he doesn't need to be our quarterback in December. And this organization will find itself in that place the Giants were in last year, right?
Right.
Where, they deballed Eli Manning for really no good reason, right? And the rumors swirl inside and outside this organization that if Lamar Jackson took over the team right now, it might look closer to Nathan Peterman than it would look to Tom Brady. Right? On a, can we win this week and what's going to happen?
Sure.
If he goes out there and runs around for 65 plays, what's going to happen to Lamar Jackson against Kansas City next month, Atlanta next month, Tampa, the Chargers, who look pretty good. I watched them play late on Sunday as well. So that's what we're looking at here, that if you're going to throw Lamar Jackson out there and hand the clipboard to Joe Flacco and say, Joe, good luck in the offseason. The Browns might want you. I don't know. Tampa might want you. Somebody else might want you. Good luck. Miami might want you. We'll see you soon. Because there are some teams out there that wouldn't mind bringing Joe Flacco in and saying, all right, we got an offensive line here. I'll get the kid with the bong gas mask up in Miami, and we'll get Joe a couple of receivers here, and we'll see if we can resuscitate Joe. Because I don't think Joe's done. I think with a bad offensive line and this Lamar Jackson thing, and you get down on the goal line and you take him and put him out, out. You might as well have him holding up the third down, sign, literally, out on the lawn, literally, and that's where we are right now, right? That's literally where we are, for better or worse. And this is what happens when you draft a kid in the first round and you tell Joe, go out there and figure it out. And, oh, by the way, when we get down to the goal line, Joe, we're going to tap you on the shoulder and make you the 12th man. You might as well, hold the pom-pom over here or wear the Poe hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's the part of this that is the part that you can't quantify, but I think is real. And I know some people, and John Harbaugh even referenced this, you look at what New Orleans is doing with Taysom Hill and Drew Brees, but Drew Brees is a Hall of Famer. Joe Flacco is not a Hall of Famer. Joe Flacco is not nearly the quarterback that Drew Brees is.
Drew Brees also has this kid named Kamara, and he's got a running game. I watched what they had a couple weeks ago. What they had was so good, they said to Willie Snead, see ya.
Exactly. But that shouldn't just be the argument that what the Ravens are doing right now is okay and optimal for a quarterback that, let's face it, has had struggles the last couple of years. And this isn't about Joe Flacco's self-esteem because, hey, he's a big boy, he's an adult, and, hey, he's been paid a lot of money and has played a lot of mediocre football over the last 5 years. And a sizable part of that is on him, even with all the other factors that we've discussed, and I've written about at length and talked about until I've been blue in the face.
Well, we've watched Aaron Rodgers run around with the JV squad, right? We've seen Tom Brady run around with a variety of JV squads, but certainly genius, coordinators and genius ability to execute difficult things and make them look easy. And did it again on Sunday night. I mean, Tom Brady was dead on arrival in September. Ben Roethlisberger Flacco embarrassed Ben Roethlisberger a month ago. Right. And now Jermaine Illuminor's playing left tackle. Lamar Jackson's on the field. There's no running game. And Flacco looks a step slow. Nobody's protecting it. You know, it's just a mess. But these other guys, Matt Ryan scored 42 points on Sunday again, right? Literally, they won a game.
I mean, things change in this league very quickly. And who knows? I mean, maybe a month from now the Ravens are revitalized and they win a couple more games at home, and then they go on the road and get a big road victory in Atlanta. And we're talking about this in a different context. But the point I was trying to make is it's not about making Joe Flacco feel bad or his self-esteem, but there is a question to ask that how is this impacting his rhythm as a passer? And I think that's really difficult to quantify because if you bring Jackson in and you pick up 7 yards and you move the chains, that looks great in the stat book, right? And we already said they haven't been able to run the ball with traditional means, but is that preventing Flacco from getting into more of a rhythm? I mean, there was an instance in the first half on Sunday where Flacco had back-to-back completions pushing the ball down the field, and then they bring Lamar Jackson in. And you just wonder, what impact does that have on the offense as a whole in terms of trying to get into a rhythm? I don't know. It might not be any, but I just know this is so unconventional, and it's great to be unconventional when what? You're being successful, when you're scoring points and you're moving the ball.
Oh, it looked great what New Orleans did here 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah, but this offense isn't doing that. I mean, look at how they fared over the last 5 weeks, and it's been very mediocre. I mean,
it's a very body of work issue over the last 5 years if you're Bisciotti looking at Harbaugh, Flacco, at the whole thing, as it is for all of us, right? It's a body of work, and where is this headed, not where did this used to be, you know?
Yeah, but you look, since that Pittsburgh game when they scored 26 points, their point totals, 9, 21, 23, 21, 16. That's not good enough in 2018. It just isn't. And I think we found out these last few weeks, not to change the subject entirely, but just to point it out, you had the top-ranked defense in the NFL statistically. And I know people right now are bristling hearing that based on how they've played the last 3 weeks. But don't the last 3 weeks prove that great offense beats great, quote, great defense in the NFL these days? It's just the truth. And that's not to say that the Ravens' defense gets a pass, because they don't. They've played poorly over the last 2 games and the final quarter of the New Orleans game. But I think it does speak to today's game. You can't win like you tried to win in 1999. And this is kind of the point that I've been trying to make for the last 5 or 6 years now, as the Ravens have done so much trying to build up their defense, and yet that defense has come up small in the biggest moments of the last 5 to 6 years. And they've done that at the expense of having a better offense. So I look at the entire thing, and from this standpoint, even though I was against, in principle, I was against drafting Lamar Jackson because of this whole being in between period that they now find themselves. But at the very least, they recognized someone who could be a playmaker. Now, is he a big enough playmaker right now that you can hand the reins over to him? Probably not. And let's also remember the Ian Rappaport report that created so much buzz Sunday morning. Go back and read that. Part of that was internal frustration over Jackson's development. Now, who's that coming from directly? It's hard to say. And I'm sure that isn't necessarily a consensus in the building, but it's very clear that at least some people are frustrated by his progress or lack thereof. So,
well, it's a chicken egg, right? It's like, let's get him to the field, but we're paying this guy $25 million. Yeah. We built the offense around him, and this kid can't throw the ball, and this kid, Flacco can throw the ball 50 yards over everybody's head if we could ever protect him up enough. Flacco understands defenses, sees defenses, but certainly at this point can't outrun defenses, right? Like, that's not where we are, and getting our quarterback hit. I mean, look, man, 95% of the game now in offense is my quarterback needs to be clean, and you need to make sure my quarterback doesn't get hit, whether his name's Brady or Rodgers or Roethlisberger. There's not this my quarterback's going to seek contact, as Deshaun Watson found out last year, and I think every quarterback who seeks contact will find out. But if you can't protect your quarterback and your quarterback can't move and you have no running game and your left tackle's a taxi squad guy, I really don't know what people expect here, but it can fall apart very quickly, and it has. It has. Luke Jones is our guy. He is obviously going to be out in Owings Mills, not this week, but next week, maybe earlier this week. Harbaugh's got all sorts of things happening here during the bye week. We are in a continuing conversation about all things Ravens offense, defense, special teams, ownership, Bisciotti, Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson. I'm going to take a quick time out right now and tell you that if there's any breaking news, you'll get it first on our text services. All brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Colatzos will be here this Thursday, next Thursday, every Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. And, of course, Dennis, as well as every other Ravens fan, with a lot of questions. And much like everyone else saying, got a lot of explaining to do here this week during the bye week. All of our WNST programming also brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing. I want to give a shout-out right now for our community and charity series. I need more guests. I need more good stories. I need more charity things, more events, more parties, more promotions, more community stuff. Please email me, nasty@WNST.net. I would love to book you on my Thursday mornings. I do these things every Thursday morning between 7 and 9. I like slotting them out months ahead of time to help organizations, and it's all brought to you by Cole Roofing. And Bill Cole will be here, thank God, on Wednesday to play the role of Dr. Melfi as I try to figure things out. There's going to be more ahead with Luke and I talking about all of this. We're going to get into some Orioles and some Terps later on in the week, but obviously it's a code purple around here as the Festivus thoughts that we'll be in Atlanta discussing anything less than some sort of major difference in the Ravens in 2019. I am Nestor. You can find me, nasty@WNST.net. You can find Luke at WNST.net. We're both out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those places where we are, WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.